But to be honest, like after reading your book, I didn't know that you're this young because the kind of depth it had, I just thought that maybe uh, I'm going to expect somebody who's much older. So hats off that you look pretty young for the kind of content you've written.
Thank you. That's really, really kind. Yeah. Yeah, it took five. Yeah, took 5 years from kind of idea to now. So it took a heap amount of research. And yeah, was
And it's
challenging, but a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, it's been quite a remarkable experience because one of our members, Sandeep, who had actually envisioned this idea, so he was the one who connected me with Gerard Kimber, and then we also got connected. So he also went through the entire book and he prepared the notes, and we were able to exchange the notes also. So he was so
That's
excited
brilliant.
about the
Yeah.
podcast. So I even have the list of all the inputs that he has given. So that was the whole purpose. And he was so, I think he even shared the videos of yours, like where you had already talked about the book at different other podcasts. And also, we even went through that just to understand, like, how basically would be your live reaction to certain questions and certain things so that we can actually prepare certain uh, insights from that and could actually customize it according to the Indian audience or the expat population that would be watching that podcast. So quite a remarkable experience in itself, and really looking forward to this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, yeah, me too. I listened to you on with Jared. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Yes. And to be honest, even at the beginning, I was pretty surprised because, look, I've been following cricket for the last 30 years now. But to be honest, beyond the excellence batsmanship that WG Grace is associated with, I had no clue that he is such a big, giant all rounder in the domestic circuits. Like, which
Yeah,
is
that's true. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe we can just begin the conversation from that only, like why we could not see that same replication at the international level, like why his bowling is not that much celebrated as compared to his batting when it comes to the international cricket.
Well, I think with WG Grace, his bowling is really like he's a very good bowler, but it's such a good era for bowlers in general that his batting stands up more in first class cricket. And then when it comes to Test cricket, he doesn't really bowl because he tests are kind of at the end of he plays Tests after his peak really. And as you get older, it's harder to maintain to be a good bowler. So he only gets 9 wickets in Test cricket, but he gets
Yes.
yeah, 2,800 in first class cricket, average of 18. So unbelievable record, really. So yeah, it was funny. We think of him as just this great batsman, which he is, but he's a great all rounder. And yeah, it just in terms of, I guess, his performance versus his contemporaries, he would probably still be the best, probably of all time. You look at Bradman and Sobers, but I think you could argue that for his all round skills, yeah, in first class cricket, I think at one point he scored off his own bat 1/3 of all the first class centuries there have ever been. It's
Yes.
astonishing. So in that sense, I think he does just he stands out so much. And of course, you do see this a lot in sports. So basically, as sports mature and as sports mature, you get more people playing, the standard increases, which means a kind of relative gap between the very best and those who are kind of good. That tends to decline over time. So when you're earlier in a sport, you actually get more variation in the kind of record in the records of people playing, and therefore someone like Grace stands out more. You wouldn't have someone stand out by as much as that on a relative basis if they were a kind of contemporary player.
And to be honest, like from your book only, I got to know that in that colonial era, USA and Argentina came so close to becoming the cricketing superpowers. Like just because of the strong hold of the colonial mindset, I would say that particular thing never got exposed, and they somehow then tapered off. They could not maximize the talent pool that they had and the craze for the game that they had. And USA, I still had an idea because I had read certain crazy stories like how the peak Australian team on their way back landed up in Philadelphia, and this is how they got exposed.
Yeah, yeah.
A swing bowler, like all those things I was still aware of, but Argentina came completely, I would say, out of the syllabus for me. Like because I had no clue that cricket, even in that era, was so popular in a country like Argentina. And in recent times, I think Afghanistan is the only outlier which has been able to grow in cricket outside the colonial influence because they were never officially, you can say, the
Yeah.
part of that ecosystem. They were not a Commonwealth country. Any such country that you believe would also be there right now, or could be a future cricketing giant, and not directly influenced by this Commonwealth scenario in cricket? Any other parallel to Afghanistan, if we could actually draw?
Nepal would probably be the nearest that's possible. I think people are very excited about the potential of the game there. There have been some really good strides, although it's sort of with Afghanistan, the team was just kind of getting better and better. With Nepal, there's been peaks and troughs, so it's been more inconsistent. Yeah, I think there is a yeah. People think if there's going to be a kind of a new Afghanistan in cricket, Nepal is probably the most likely to be. Yeah, I can't really like. There's lots of countries where cricket is at a decent level and is sort of could be the third or fourth biggest sport, but Nepal stands out in terms of it could be the most popular sport there. In some ways, it already is, and have a really strong team. But just to go back to the start of your question, yeah, this was one of the big silences for me in the book. Um, there are these sliding doors moments when you could have more countries that play Test cricket. And the key moment is 1909. So that's when the first global governing body for cricket is founded. And the first one is Imperial. So you have to be part of the British Empire at the time to be part of this club. And that excludes Argentina, it excludes America. And at some point they kind of think, well, this club doesn't want us, so let's play other sports that do. But in terms of their quality at the time, I argue they were both in top five or so in the world, so probably better than say New Zealand at the time. Um, Argentina have several tours where they play against an MTC side who's actually it's like a very strong MTC side. It's at least a similar standard to an MTC side that plays Test matches in South Africa. And they win matches. They have really tight series. Clem Gibson is an interesting character. So he's a kind of Anglo-Argentine. Yeah, he lots of business interests in Argentina. He goes to school in Eton in England. But in 1924-5, he's called up for the Ashes tour for England in Australia. In Buenos Aires, he gets the sort of telegram, but he turns it down to stay in Argentina. Obviously, a long way from there to Australia. But yeah, you could have had an Anglo-Argentine playing in an Ashes series.
Exactly. And that would have been, and that too in an era where all those things were unheard of or unimaginable also. And like, what exactly has been the rationale behind the book? Like, considering that I have not seen such a comprehensive account of Test cricket ever. I've listened to a lot of podcasts, I've read certain books around that, but like, what exactly was your rationale, your I would say go-to reason that why you kind of came up with this book? Any background story, anything that you would like to share here?
Yeah, I'll get up a copy here so I can see. So yeah, this took me, it was March 2020 when I had the idea. So 5 years ago, here we are now. And the reason for the idea was very simple. So I actually was having dinner with Simon Wilde, who wrote a very good history of England Test cricket. And there's been loads of great histories of countries throughout the world. But what I was looking to read really was a global history that showed how these stories interconnect and shows how certain countries at certain times they're leading the way and they're shaping trends. And yeah, this is a book about the players, matches, and politics that have shaped the game over time, all the way around the world. And I just thought that what I had in mind didn't really exist, and I was like, I'm going to have a crack at writing it. So it was a bit of a monster task to be honest. Like I
Exactly, because
read over 300 books, did 40 plus interviews with some of the great players in the world. I think just from India, I talked with Sachin Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid, Ravichandran, and Ashwin, Jinka Rahana. So some absolute fantastic names. And actually, it was amazing to get a sense of their pride at being part of this story. They do feel they're part of this much bigger story than them, and they are. Yeah, I think a lot of players are really aware of the legacy and history of Test cricket. Not to say they kind of know every result or anything, but they do get a sense of this amazing game that has lasted. It's lasted 148 years now, which is kind of odd because you think of it. I guess from its history, from its start, people have been saying there's no place in society for a game that lasts so long. But actually, as I show, Test cricket has changed so much over time. So this big myth it doesn't change, but matches have been everything from 3 days to timeless, and now the 5 days. The number of balls per over has changed. We've had helmets was a big one. covered wickets, uncovered wickets. Number of teams, of course, has gone from 2 to
Yes.
12. We now have the World Test Championship. We have day-night tests. So many things have changed. And I think that's a reason why Test cricket has endured, actually.
And honestly speaking, like I really was amazed that you already interacted with such big giants of the game. So, what was the experience like talking to people like Sachin Tendulkar, Brian Lara, and Pat Cummins, Ashwin? So, what exactly were like the gist of the discussions? Something that the audience would love to know, because like considering that they have played the game, they're pretty much the part of that book, because they have been
Yeah.
like they have built a legacy of their own. But understanding the game from their perspective and how they would look as compared to a commoner like me who would just have a very different perspective about things. So any analogies, any things that would like to share here?
Yeah, I think I was able to go quite, in depth with them, which was really nice because I think they, when they heard about the project, they appreciated it was, it was not going to, I was not trying to get headlines from them really. I was trying to get an understanding and a sense of what it was like to play the game, and to bring those experiences across. Often they were able to, have some distance from their own playing career, which gives them more perspective. And that was I think yeah, with Sachin it was interesting because I was sort of taking a step back. What would I kind of look at now? And one of the things that was so amazing is away from home, Tendulkar only wins one of his first 44 Test matches, so that's astonishing, really. And there's a series of great innings he plays, which are again and again in defeats, and getting a sense of what that felt like actually, the kind of brutality that you can do everything your country asks you for, and you still keep on losing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's remarkable because I think the best of Tendulkar was actually in that period. It was in the kind of mid late 1990s was his absolute peak, I think. And that was a time when India just didn't win away from home at all.
Yes.
Um, so it's a quite an odd thing. I mean that's the thing about Test cricket is you get that quite a lot. You get players who are playing unbelievably well and still still keep on losing. I also talked with Andy Flower, and in about 2001 he has a streak of like 10 Test matches. He averages over 100. He has an incredible tour of India where he gets I think 532 runs for twice
Yes.
out, just a joke.
A beautiful
Um,
double hundred in Delhi also. I remember that because I was so frustrated because he didn't think like getting out. And that kind of, I think, set the precedence for the BGT also, because Ganguly, India's captain at that time, realized that with this spin attack, they will not be able to do anything against the mighty Aussies. And that is how he went hunting for Harbhajan Singh again, had put his captaincy on the line to get him back into that, so that in 2001, BGT, Harbhajan could play, because Harbhajan was not in the scheme of things at that time, because he had certain behavioral issues or was other things were around him. So Ganguly, just because of this double hundred by Andy Flower, was so instigated because he just felt that the spin attack that we had was just not good enough. So that's why he begged the selectors, had even put his captaincy on the line, that I'm ready to get fired also, but I need this guy in my team. Otherwise, Australians are going to kill us. And I could relate to that.
No, that's so funny. That is a story. But yeah, to kind of think you can be that good, and yeah, Zimbabwe still end up they lose that series despite everything he's done. So it's like he really couldn't have done any more. And also he's keeping wicket, he's batting at five, so he's just doing everything. And
Yes.
yeah, that I think that burden of being a great player in a struggling team is so tough because there's just so much exposure on you, and you're kind of under the cosh the whole time. Whereas if you're in a better team, as a batter, whatever, you get more time when you don't have to bat because other people are, they've done their job. So that's a reoccurring thing, and that burden, it is a really tough one, and how you can separate. In a way, you kind of need to separate your own performances from those of because you can't get too frustrated at your teammates because they're obviously doing their best. They're just not as talented as you,
Yes.
right?
And the best thing I liked about the book is the cover itself. It is a resemblance of the whites that people wear while playing Test cricket. And it might look very simple from the outside, but as we know, that Test cricket is a very layered composition. And similarly, I think the book also had different facets to it. And obviously, coming back to the players also, like how different it is to interact with somebody who's already played the game, has retired for almost a decade, not the active part of the game anymore, as compared to somebody like Cummins, who is an active captain of a mighty Australian team, and Ashwin, who's pretty much the active cricketer. So, are there different perspectives, or are they able to differentiate themselves from the game and need to and able to give that outsider's perspective from outsider's lens, or is it like almost the same? Like your experience on these two sets of players?
I think so. I think with contemporary players, because it is a book, and then it would be out in a while, and it would hopefully be out for a long time. I think they were able to. I think it felt different to like a press conference with them. 'Cause obviously, they do so many press conferences, and there's that immediacy where people maybe looking for a headline, and then it's gone. I think they were able to they did get a sense of it was a longer project, and so they were kind of mentally in their mind, they were taking a step back and thinking about things from a bigger perspective. So Cummins, actually, one of the really interesting things he said, in a different era he would have had to retire early, because the support from Cricket Australia, the medical support, the financial support, to be honest, was so much. So remember, he played one test and he breaks down, doesn't play for 6 years afterwards.
Yes.
But in that period, Australia gave him so much backing because they recognised his talent as a fast bowler. And actually since he's come back, he's barely got injured at all. And he very much recognised that his career would not have been possible in a different era, which is a very interesting perspective and that shows a good level of awareness. And also, actually, to be honest, as he acknowledged as well, it does show maybe the unfairness in the game, because if Cummins had been from West Indies or Sri Lanka, they probably wouldn't have been able to support him in the same way for that 5 years, 6 years when he wasn't playing matches. So that was a really, that does show potentially that there's talent being lost in other countries who haven't got the support network that someone like Australia do. And yeah, I mean, Ashwin is always a delight to talk to. He just the level in which he thinks about cricket, absolutely fascinating. He went so in depth about his journey. It's also, of course, he was integral to the great Indian team, which won 18 series in a row at home. Unprecedented without history. I argue in the book that India at home from 2012 to 24 were the best home team in history, even better than Clive Law's West Indies or Steve Waugh's Australia, because you're looking at, they're not only winning everything, they're winning a third of games by an innings. It's an unbelievable level of domination. I think at the core of that, really, if you have Ashwin and Jadeja, these are two guys who in Indian conditions can bat 6 or 7, and they're
Yes.
two of the best spinners of all time. So you basically have a cheat code where you have a 5-man attack in every game, and you're batting really deep. And you have these two incredible spinners, and it's like everything else, you fit the other guys around that. But that is such a great start, to the extent I think that in about 5 or 6 years ago, if you were to do a draft, a draft test cricket picks, so you can each pick, you each pick someone, anyone from in the world, and you're told, this test will be in India, right? I think the first two picks might have been Ashwin and Ravindra Jadeja. Like that's how big, how incredible they were, and even the fact that they turn the ball in different directions, right? It's
Yes.
just absolutely perfect.
And
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
yeah, and quite a different bowlers also. And considering that one is a proper traditional off spinner, the other one is that quick arm, left arm finger spinner, like with ability to vary his pace and everything. Like, totally agree on that. And
But it was, yeah. So it was one of the great things was talking to players about other players, their opponents, and their teammates and stuff. So Ashwin on Jadeja was interesting. He's like, there's this myth that what Jadeja does is kind of simple because he's just firing it on a spot, and he actually said no, it's unbelievably skillful. Everything he has talks about the subtle changes of Jadeja, how he can be underestimated by opponents and things. And that was a lovely thing, kind of to get an appreciation from some great players of other Test players. And it just shows all the different varieties you need in Test cricket and the different ways to do well in Test cricket. There's no one formula, which is part of what makes it so interesting.
And talking about the eras, I think you really pointed out a good question here. Like, according to you, what do you think are the best cricketing teams ever, like era-wise, if we talk about? Because you have mentioned that explicitly in your book also, something that you would like to share with the audience, your perspective. Like, era-wise, the teams actually dominated the opposition. They have set something which is unparalleled in the history. There's no presiding, I would say, equivalent to that. Anything that you would like to share on that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is only from the 1950s can we talk of Test cricket as a really a multi-nation sport. So until 1948, three-quarters of all the Test matches had involved England against a different opponent. So it's almost like you have a series of contests with England in the middle, and then from the 50s onwards, you begin to you get Test cricket as a proper, more proper international sport. So you have other rivalries. Australia West Indies becomes the biggest rivalry for a long time, for example, that don't revolve around England. So you can begin to talk about teams in that context and answer your question, I guess.
Yeah.
So I mean, Australians of 48 would an unbelievable team, would be up there. But I would say for this question, you need to be really 1950s or afterwards. So, everyone does say, and it is a broadly right, it's right that the two absolute stars of the West Indies, West Indies don't lose from 1980 to 95, and obviously all the fast bowlers, Viv Richardson stuff, an incredible team. You have the Steve Waugh Australians from about 99 to '07 is their peak, although they beat West Indies away in 95. So you can say it's a 12-year era. And then I think from 99 when Adam Gilchrist comes in, basically Australia were drawing matches before, and then their run rates surge, and they basically replace those draws with victories, and they go on those 60 that run of 16 matches in a row. So those would be the kind of absolute two standouts. And then in that kind of little bit just below, I think South Africa are very underestimated. So South Africa from 2006 to 15, they don't lose a series away from home for 9 years,
I know.
which is a really incredible achievement. I think they do lose twice at home to Australia in that period, but that's a two series losses in 30. They're a really, you look at that bowling attack, with Steyn, Morkel, Philander, then you have Callis as a great all rounder. You have so much, and the batting is unbelievable. You have De Villiers, Amler. You have Graham Smith, the batsman, who's a very underrated batsman.
Yes.
Does a lot better away from home. And so what happens in that team? South Africa basically they prepare very spicy wickets at home. And they say our batsmen will be good enough to grind to even if it's just 280, and our bowling attack is so good that we'll bowl the opponents out for 200. So it's a very brave. It's actually quite a brave policy that Smith kind of leads. It hurts his Test average because he's actually really a great Test batsman. Actually, looking at it, you're surprised at how much of a great Test batsman he is. I think he gets 5 centuries and fourth innings run chases. And they're chasing 420 in Perth and stuff. So this is a great side. They did win in Australia 3 times in a row, which
Yes.
pretty much unprecedented. So that would be a great team. Pakistan in 1980s actually are a terrific team, and they're maybe a bit forgotten because West Indies are the best. But Pakistan and West Indies, they play 3 series from 1986 to 1990. It's 1-1 on every occasion. West Indies, Pakistan might well have won West Indies in 1988 had it not been for some questionable umpiring decision, with Abdul Qadir not getting a number of LBW appeals in the fourth innings in Barbados in '88.
Yes.
So they really go toe to toe with West Indies, which is a formidable achievement, and they were very good rounded side generally, and they're bowling, unbelievable. You have Wazim, Waqar, then you have either Abdul Qadir or Mushtaq Ahmed. You have Imran Khan as well. Like you have a really formidable attack. So that would be a side that's kind of on the edges. And we have talked about the India 2013 to 24. That would be up there. That's a terrific side. The 18 series wins in a row at home. They win twice in Australia, so they are a great side. I think the Indian side they're a couple of wins away from being like number three undisputedly. But they don't get those wins, right? So if they win a World Test Championship final or two, that really pushes them up. And there was a series in South Africa in 2018 where they lose 2-1 and they're really competitive. Series, actually series in England in 2018 they lose 4-1 in England, but it's such a close, like that could easily have been 3-2 the other way. And I think you have to say if they win in either, say they win one in either South Africa or England, and they win a WTC final, then that puts them on probably as number three. As it is, I think the top two are quite clear, and then there's three or four in that period below. But I think it's two, and then Daylight, and then the batch underneath. We haven't talked. This was the other team we haven't talked about who have a good claim is England in the 1950s. So England from sort of 51 to 59 are they're a really good side. They're very versatile. They win in South Africa. They draw in West Indies. They win the Ashes away. They win the Ashes at home. That they are very good side as well. And actually, unusually for an England team, they have some great spin bowling. You know, they have Jim Laker,
Yes.
they have Tony Lock. Yeah. So they're very versatile as a bowling attack, and they have some. You know, they have Cowdrey, they have Peter May, have Len Hutton
Yes.
towards the end of his career, who's an incredible bat. So yeah, England of the 50s would be in that group as well. So I think that's what's that? That's four groups in the that's four teams in the three to six category. You can kind of argue either way, really. And then a couple of teams above. And I suppose, yeah, I mean, even West Indies early 60s are a very good side. Possibly
Yes.
don't play quite enough to be in this category, but they're a formidable side. And I think the thing you also have to say is that there's basically, apart from 1980s, there's no such thing as a bad Australian team. Australia are consistently the gold standard. And
Yes.
I was surprised, like, we all know that, like, we know cricket, but I was surprised by the extent of that. So in the history of Test cricket, Australia win 1.75 tests for every one they lose. The next best is 1.25. So that's like a 50% difference on
Yes.
average. So Australia really, yeah, pays me to say, but they are the gold
Yes.
standard over time.
And I have a couple of questions on that. Like, what basically sets them apart? Because you have mentioned explicitly about that, the culture that they have, the elitist culture that England had, about the batsmanship, about the bowlers, but somehow such a thing was not
Yeah.
existent in Australia. If you could actually throw some light on that, because I think this will be something very different for the audience, because majority of the people don't even know that there was actually a class structure existing in cricket also, which was not existent in Australia. And this is the reason why they benefited for a number of years.
Yeah, so obviously, how you are in Test cricket, so many factors all feed into that. But you know, one of the very simple reasons which I think holds true is that Australia, compared to pretty much every other country over time, they've been better at picking their actual best 11 players to be in their Test team. So in England, they used to have this system called amateurs and professionals. So basically, if you're an amateur, you're kind of from an aristocratic family. You are unpaid in theory, although you get these big expenses that are often worth more than being a professional. And it's really a sort of it's social standing. You know, you can only be an amateur really if you go to a very private school. You're well connected and stuff. And then you have professionals who are just normal. They're paid cricketers. They're paid for their jobs. And you have this very this complete divide, and it lasts till 1962 in county cricket and 1952 in Test cricket. Um, and England, what they do, because they're so obsessed with picking the right sort of person to be captain, they pick players who just aren't worth their place in the side. So in the first 10 Ashes tours of the 20th century, so from 1903 to 1951, which the MCC run, 50 Test matches. So the average with the bat from all the England captains in that period is 22 with the bat. Top score is 79. So no centuries in 50 Test matches.
Three
So
test matches.
you're starting from the premise that your captain is not worth their place in the side, which just is clearly true. So on average, a captain's not worth his place in the side, and then you're kind of picking the rest of the team around them. So it's like you're playing with 10 men almost, because of this weird class obsession, and that holds back England so much. Australia, everyone until sort of the 1980s is basically a semi-pro, which means they are paid to play cricket, but they have other jobs as well. But within the team, everyone has the same standing, and there's not such an obsession with class in terms of how they assemble the team. So what happens is actually the Australian team is much more closer to being the best 11 players, and this is also where you have the idea that England has these specialist captains, and then Australia picks a team and then picks a captain. Well, a lot of that is rooted in this amateur professional thing, because England has to have these specialist captains because it is picking captains from a different pool. England can't just pick their best 11 players and then pick the captain, because they might have 11 professionals. In fact, they often probably would based on merit. So that's a big thing that holds England back, and Australia doesn't have this. And of course, other countries have these divides in different ways as well. So West Indies until 1960s, their captains are all white,
Yes.
and picking four or five players who are white in their team. And on average, they have some very good white players, but on average, these players are worse than other players, and they're bringing down the quality of the team. So the average of all West Indies white players in the top six, who bat in the top six, the 1960 was 28. The average for everyone else who bats in the top six of West Indies in that period is 43. So they're picking much weaker players on average,
Yes.
basically because people who run West Indies Cricket Board they are often white, and they want to promote a certain number of white players. So that is really holding West Indies back. And of course, they also have the complication of being made up of so many different islands. So they're trying to appease different factions. So in their first Test series at home in 1930, they pick 28 different players and four different captains, one for each Test, because of the
Yeah.
way that team is picked. So there's a kind of there's squabbling between islands to get their players in rather than to pick the best 11 players. Um, and then in India, actually, you've seen the tours, especially the tours during the 1930s. Social class plays a big factor. It's even
Yes.
linked to actually funding the tours as well. So you do get a situation where again you don't pick the best 11 players. And Australia, yeah, all these other countries have these kind of issues, and Australia do have issues. We look at the story of Eddie Gilbert, Aboriginal fast bowler 1930s. He definitely should have played Test cricket. So that was,
Yes.
he was basically denied by, racism in the country, and in the cricket board. So that, horrendous story. But that all being said, on average, an Australian Test team throughout history has been much closer to being the genuine best 11 players than has been true of most other countries. So that is a big, big factor in what Australia do better over time. And then we have to point, and then we look at the broader advantages the country has. The weather it is a big factor, right? You can play cricket basically all year round there.
Yes.
That's a massive thing. You have the outdoors culture and abundant space. Even in cities, you have a lot of space. Different, in a city, London or whatever, you don't have that in the same way. So Australia, you have the climate, the abundant space. And I think also, I talked with Ian Chappell, and he said a big factor is historically over time the grade system, and you have it's a pyramid structure where if you do
Yes.
well at a very low level, you then go up to the next level and the next and the next, and it's very, very clear and kind of transparent, um, how you advance, and that is really important. And so you do still start of Australian summers, you still get Test players playing in club cricket as well. I think that
Yes.
is that is a factor as well. So you have and England players who go to Australia, they often say that grade cricket is a higher standard than second 11 county cricket. So I think that is a part of Australia's system as well. But you also, yeah, you have also a multi-sport climate, so it's a generally athletic climate. Players will play other sports as well over the year. So there's a level of fitness there as well, which I don't think is always true in other countries.
And it's like part of the culture because, like, on an average, an Australian could would pick three different sports, and like swimming is pretty much like a life skill for them. And like this class divide, I'm glad you mentioned because in India, I think it was quite an irony that somebody from the royal family actually kind of broke the ceiling and allowed other people to come into the ecosystem. Nawab Pataudi in 1960s, and you've even mentioned very explicitly about him in your book also, like how he was the one who kind of allowed people like Bishan Singh Bedi to come into the ecosystem, because apart from that particular era, before that everything was all about five to six different cricketing centers in India. So you could expect people coming from Mumbai cricket, from Bengaluru, from Chennai, from all the top these six cricketing centers. But to even imagine somebody coming from outside these cricketing centers were unheard of. So Bishan Singh Bedi comes from a very small town in North India. Now it's a big industrial town, Amritsar, and for him to be a part of that ecosystem, to be a part of that team, was only made possible because Nawab Patoti went out of his way to basically create an environment in the team where winning was important. And I even read the story about how in your book itself, like how India went to the New Zealand and they were penalized because the match ended in 4 days and there was a revenue loss. So they were penalized for winning the match in 4 days only. So that was a pretty fascinating story. And the way you have, I would say, crafted the entire thing and have mixed all those stories beautifully. Because having said that, one thing, and you've even mentioned about the Aborigines impact on cricket also, because I clearly remember, I think he was one of the fastest bowler in that era, if I'm not mistaken, because I read it somewhere.
Who?
Uh, 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 Gilbert, the one you had
Yeah, yeah,
mentioned,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
and still he had a very, yeah, he had a
No,
very,
because he bowled an over to five balls to Don Bradman, and Don
yes,
Bradman said they were the fastest he ever faced in his career, and he gets
yes,
Bradman
yes,
out of the last ball with actually a bouncer, which I think was a factor in then England pursuing the strategy of bodyline against Bradman.
yes,
Because word reached Douglas Jardine, England's captain, from a contact he had in Australia about what had happened, and then I think that helped to cement in his mind what England were going
Yes.
to
And
ex-
had a very sad story, to be honest, never kind of got that equal status, and also went through a lot of hardships. Because I've read about him, and it's glad you've mentioned the entire journey of it. And it's quite fascinating also. Like, having said that, and I really appreciate that you mentioned about the spicy wickets in South Africa, because when a young 25-year-old captain was made the Indian captain, Virat Kohli, then he also kind of brought the same thing to Indian cricket. Because in 2015, the first series where South Africa lost to India, the wickets were a lot spicier. So even Virat kind of compromised his own batting average in home matches to give Turner, so that he could actually uh, get some home advantage, and then Ashwin and Jadeja would just run through the sides. I think in 2015, when South Africa came to India, the first away series that they had lost in 9 years was primarily due to those spicy wickets. And maybe Virat Kohli took a leaf out of Smith's book, and he kind of
Yes,
implemented
yeah.
the same thing. And really just want to understand, like, how is the overall reaction about Virat quitting Test cricket, considering that what all he has done for the Indian Test cricket. And I personally believe in last 7 to 8 years, two people who are largely responsible for making Test cricket a more admirable sport in India are Virat Kohli and Rishabh Pant. Rishabh Pant for all the antics that he do on the field, and with all the X factor he brings, and Virat Kohli just because of the pure energy that he brings on the field. So, how things are going to change according to you once, like, Virat now is retired, and now he won't be even the part of the England series?
Yeah, I think certainly people in England are pretty sad he's retired because I think we agreed he probably wasn't in the last 5 years average of 31. I think he's been
Yes.
not been the force he was, but he still does bring a lot to Test cricket. Certainly for casual fans, he's a kind of bloke that you always want to be there and you want to see him bat. And yeah, so that it is a shame for the series he's not playing. In terms of what it means for Test cricket, I mean, Test cricket's story over time has been of these great players retiring, leaving huge holes, but then someone coming back. You know, you might have thought that when Tendulkar retired, that would be disastrous for Test cricket. Actually, India actually enjoyed, I think, their best ever team just after he retired. And they found these new stars. So there's a kind of Test cricket does it regenerates again and again, and that's part of what's kept it here. So I'm not going to say that Kohli retiring is going to be a complete disaster for Test cricket, necessarily. I think it gives scope for new stars to emerge and everything. But clearly, I think the seriousness with which Kohli took Test cricket, the way he did, that was important. Just like, and people say this is not just an Indian thing. If Ben Stokes were to stop playing Test cricket and become a franchise player only, that would be a huge blow for Test cricket. Of course, yeah, you do need the best players playing it, taking it really, really seriously. But yeah, I don't think Kohli retiring will necessarily kind of end that. It is a challenge. I'm sure Test cricket administrators would have loved him to play for another couple of years. And I was actually a little bit surprised. I thought Rohit Sharma was probably going to retire. I thought Kohli would have at least one more series. Especially as he's based in England now, really. So I was a bit surprised. But I think, yeah, I don't think England fans are naive. England fans know that whoever does play for India instead will be really, really strong. And I think that, the depth of Indian cricket, which is actually one of the big stories last few chapters of the book, that has been such a shift. And we saw that in 2021 in Australia, India had 10 players missing in that whole bowling attack, still won at the Gabba, just remarkable. And so with the level of depth that's now being created in Indian cricket,
Yes.
there'll be new stars that emerge. And I think we alluded to it there, but one of the big shifts actually is India used to rely on 5 or 6 cities for the vast majority of their talent, and now they're getting talented players from everywhere. And I talked with Rahul Dravid. He said the big difference is that when he was growing up, if the state selector didn't think you were good enough at, say, under 19 level, then you were in trouble. You weren't going to make it. And now it's not just the state selectors. There's also the talent scouts from IPL teams, the talent scouts from teams in these state T20 leagues, which are very prominent as well. You also have private academies. So they are, most people pay to go to these, but they're also sponsoring players because they want to develop great players as well. So we saw with Kohli's academy, they will obviously be advertising their role in his journey. And we have, even, the kind of national under 19 setup, they're also doing loads of scouting as well. And, Raul told me about, how they look at 150 players and assess them for each under-19 World Cup, which is just an amazingly thorough process. And so basically, you know, he said, as Dravid said, if you're good enough now, it's very hard to get missed, and that's a big change with the future, a big change from the past. And that basically all means that the quality of players India are producing is harder than ever, especially as now you can make a really good living in India as a cricketer, even if you don't come near the Test team. So this is a big difference from the past. You actually got a lot of players who were very good who would retire in their mid-20s. Especially if you were a good state player but weren't playing for India, you would think you could earn more doing something else. And even if you were kind of on the fringe of the national team, you might retire early because you weren't being paid a huge amount. And just like in that 60s Test against New Zealand, if you won early, you'd be getting docked some of your pay anyway.
And seriously, and I'm glad you mentioned Rahul Dravid because he's one guy who's instrumental in building the entire ecosystem in India. Because, like, even after retiring from Test cricket way back in 2012, the way he went up the ladder in the coaching circles also, like, started with the junior team, then started coaching India A, and then became the part of NCA. And after that, he kind of felt that he needs to now graduate to the international level where he started coaching India team, and he went through the entire hierarchy. He could have skipped the ladder because he was already quite a reputed player and very structured
Yeah,
player. But I think that his entire coaching journey kind of also reflects how the Test cricket is embedded in him, and how those fundamentals of Test cricket were like always the basis for his journey, because that is the way he kind of structured his coaching journey. Also, I've not seen somebody like going through in the entire process, like from a junior team to the A teams and to the NCAs and then to the national team. So I think he's pretty much the epitome of how the Test cricket is all about, and the detail that he has, somebody who's very different from Sachin Tendulkar and still equally effective as far as Test cricket is concerned. And in patches, there were eras where he was even more effective, I would say, because like I'm an ardent Sachin fan. He has ruled a part of my life for good 20 years, I would say, but still, like what Rahul brings to Test cricket is something very different. And I'm glad like you had a very structured discussion with him also. Like, what was the difference? Like talking to Sachin and talking to Dravid, like two different personalities, two different takes on Test cricket. So any insights?
Well, yeah, good question. I mean, yeah, both, obviously amazing players. Both have such a kind of reverence for Test cricket and the pride they feel at being part of it, this bigger story. But Dravid, I think, because of he's done so much in Indian cricket in different levels, and so I think he was, in terms of the kind of macro picture of India's rise, he was almost the best person to speak about that, because, as you said, he's coached all these different levels, and obviously his own career. He wasn't, I think his Test debut was 23 or so. So he
Yes.
youngish, but he wasn't like Sachin. Sachin was 7 years younger, right?
Yes.
So he'd sort of, because of his experience, he'd experienced a bit of the graft of state cricket and what that was like and how that's changed. And he was very interested on the pitches in state. He said the pitches have been such a difference. He said, when he was growing up, the pitches in state cricket, they would all just spin the whole time. And so facing fast bowling would then be such a huge, huge leap at test level. And he said now actually, you don't, obviously we see India produce so many more fast bowlers now, but also we see India play fast bowling so much better. And he says basically the pitches, he gives a lot of credit to the pitches at the Ranji Trophy level. And it says they have changed to become much more fast bowler friendly. And basically, India is never going to lack for good spin bowlers, really. But the pitches have made up India's shortfall traditionally, and it is amazing looking back. Kapil Dev, 1979, is the first Indian fast bowler to get 100 Test wickets. So it's remarkable. There was this, and now Pataudi, to go back to him, Tiger Pataudi, when he picks these four spinners, the Quartet in England, everyone kind of the methodology of this story is that it's done as a kind of, it's a genius tactical plan, and he is unleashing this secret weapon and everything. But actually, I went back to read his book and read contemporary interviews and stuff with him, and he was very much pretty honest that this was a strategy of desperation, really, because he said, he always said for India to be good, they need to have fast bowlers. That's the number one thing that needs to change in Indian cricket. But because we don't have them, we're not going to pick ones who aren't good enough, which is completely fair. But he never, it was not an ideological thing. It was pragmatic, really. He was saying we just don't have any guys who are good enough, but we need to find a way to produce those. And that has been such a big shift in Indian cricket. And now, actually, when you pick a spicy green top. India might not pick a spin or just pick Jadeja, but the other team could still be 150 all out because you had Bumrah, Siraj, you've had Shami, who are all going to be absolutely there for you every single ball.
And I'm glad you mentioned about the spin quartet because I have a couple of questions around that because I read it somewhere that Pataudi used to go back to England to captain Sussex. If I'm not wrong, he pretty much captained Sussex in county, and there was a match, I think, with the tour match with the greats of West Indies, and he was able to defeat them by using his fast bowlers really well. And I think Wesley Halls was playing from West Indies at that time, and even on a very spicy wicket, he was able to out bat them, out gun them with his masterful tactics. So it was not all about that he just knew how to handle spin bowlers, but he always wanted to have good fast bowlers. And I'm glad you mentioned that it was out of desperation. And I'm also amazed to see that even South Africa, in your book, you have mentioned that also had a spin quartet. So I don't think so. Majority.
Yes. In the early 1900s, that's right. And they were
Yes.
all bowling the googly as well. So four leg
Yes.
spinners who all bowl the googly, which is amazing because they had these matting wickets at the time. And again, now South Africa is the most pace-friendly, really, country in the world. But it wasn't always this way, and that was one of the kind of great stories to explore. How they
Yes.
beat England 4-1 in a Test series, 1906, and it was basically a lot of that was through spin. So that was a
And
really fascinating story.
yes, and I really loved that part because I had no clue, to be honest. And now, considering that the water table in South Africa is going down pretty rapidly, like in 2018, Cape Town has been declared as a zero water table city. And with 2027 World Cup happening in that part of the world, we have also seen that now in SA20 and even in domestic cricket in South Africa, the spinners have started to make their way in because the pitches have become a lot drier because of lack of water in general. So, do you think so that this kind of an era can come back to South African cricket, like something we had in the early 1900s, or is it's like just a flash in the pan?
So that's a good question. So that you're right. You're right. South Africa are trying to bring spin back a little bit, but I think fast bowling at this point is so ingrained in the cricket culture of South Africa. Remember, in 1900s, the cricket country was embryonic. They were building it really. Now, I think it's so built into the kind of DNA of South African cricket, and they have since readmission they've produced. I think they have more bowlers to 275 Test wickets than more fast bowlers than any other country. Like they produce an unbelievable array of quick bowlers. So I don't think that will change. I think South Africa that will remain their preferred mode of attack. But clearly, if they're going to also develop a few more spinners, that would help them as well. And I think it's kind of like the India example is revealing it. It's like you have a particular strength as a cricket country. Can you find a way to retain that, but also improve your weakness at domestic level? And basically say, you can actually have of course, you can have a separation between domestic and international pitches, which I think is quite a smart thing to do. Like in India, the wickets turn more at international level than at domestic level because at international level you are trying to beat your opponents who don't have experience in these conditions in the same way. At domestic levels, you're trying to build more rounded players. So there is a certain logic in having a two-pronged approach there. So yeah, that would be interesting to see. In general, fast bowling is going through a really good era now, and spin is slightly struggling. And one of the reasons is the pace of play is increased in terms of number of runs per over, but also the strike rate has gone up as well. So you're having more innings over in 70, 80 overs. In which case that leaves less role for spinners, right? Because you're getting more because when the ball is new, you're not having to bowl for a day plus, which is when physically fast bowlers can't keep going as much.
Yes.
So in the history of Test cricket, right now we are in a pretty pace is dominating more than spin, which
Yes.
is
I
not to
think
say
wobble ball, all those things have also played their part.
bubble ball is crucial. Yeah,
Yeah. And considering that you have, I think, brought a brilliant point because the duration of the innings have reduced so much because batters are scoring much faster. So the point of having a spinner so that you could rotate your spaces around him have become kind of pointless, and that's why we have seen a lot of teams now going with all pace attacks, and that's a brilliant insight. And coming back to the similar thing, now India is going to be in England, and we'll be having a summer where a young Indian team would be visiting England, and even the itinerary I was going through it. So I just wanted to have your perspectives also on it. Like the first Test match is going to be in the northern part of England, so Leeds. Uh, so what exactly do you think? So we can expect on that kind of a pitch, where like I was reading the composition of the pitch also. It's 33% sand, 33% silt, 33% clay, so it's a little bouncier. And the weather also plays its part because it's in the northern part of the country. So are we going to have spicier wickets, or like what kind of an expectations we can have from uh, England series this time around?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because England actually in the Basil era they've like wickets that are a bit flatter actually because that's when their batsmen have really thrived, and I think they might not fancy facing Bumrah on spicy wickets necessarily. So I think they'll be fairly flat in character as they were in the Ashes in 2023. They were pretty flat. So I think
Yes.
no, I think they will be fairly flat in character. Um, and I think it will be yeah. I don't think we'll see any draws this series. I think my prediction I said before was 3-2 to England.
Yes.
Which I
Because
think, yeah, because I think India, Boomer will play 3 or 4 tests. India could win a couple of those very easily. They have, their bowling attack is excellent. And I think that they do have, England's bowling attack is actually, uh, there are still some question marks over it. So yeah, it's maybe India's bowling attack is their stronger aspect. England's batting is their stronger aspect. So it's an interesting clash in that sense.
so on those flatter wickets, do you think so? Kuldeep Yadav would even be factor. So can we see him ball on those?
Well, I would say, yeah, in the Basil era, high quality wristband's done very well against England. So, I think Kuldeep should definitely play. I think absolutely should play. I think
Because
he's good enough. I think he's good enough actually, even with the ball, 30, 20, 30 overs old. I think he can still be a big asset. And also he just gives, a Jamie Smith would probably never have faced he'd have faced very few left arm wrist spinners, and he'd faced no left arm wrist spinner in the same league as Kuldeep. So there's such a rare type bowler. There's always an extra value, but also he's just a very skillful bowler now. So I guess for India, the question is: does England actually have a lot of what? One thing in England's favour is their bowlers can basically all bat pretty well. So you might have a team conceivably that has someone like Wokes at number 9, even. It bats really deep.
exactly.
You've got
And
Gus who's got, and India might be in a position where actually they pick their 4 best bowlers. They're ending up with someone like Bumrah at 8 or 9, even at 8, which is kind of horrible. So that's
yes,
the question: how much India are ready to compromise? I can
but
see there's a case for me for India to pick their 7 best bats and their 4 best bowlers, and kind of
I,
not
I
really compromise.
personally feel that Gautam Gambhir has given that template already, that generally that he would go for 3 proper bowlers, 3 all-rounders, and 5 batters, because this is the kind of template he showed in BGT also. So I'm expecting that he'll go for 3 all-rounders, 3 proper bowlers, and 5 batters, because this is what he's been doing. Because he, even in Test cricket, he fancies those left arm, those left-right combinations, those value for having deep batting lineups. And one more thing, as far as Headingley is concerned, I have 2 very contrasting memories. 2002 Test match where India
Yeah,
chose to bat first on a green top in overcast conditions, and with the like spinners doing all the bulk of the stuff, because I think Anil Kumble took 7 wickets in that match. Even Harbhajan bowled really well. And then 2021, where we were steamrolled. I think we bundled out for 78 in first inning itself. The
yes,
ball
that's
was
right.
seaming, doing all its stuff. And in second innings also, I clearly remember when the day ended, Pujara and Kohli were batting beautifully. And I was expecting that maybe there might be maybe an outright chance of some miracle. Maybe we might see a repeat of Eden Gardens or something of that sort. And next morning, the second new ball comes in and Indian batting collapsed. I think they were out for 63 runs, and the last 8 wickets went for like 60 odd runs. And from 215 for 2, we went down to 278 all out. So there are 2 contrasting memories. That's why I was a little curious that this time around, what can we actually expect? That heading the 2002 wicket, which was relatively flat, where like in one session, if I remember correctly, on the second day, just before the match ended, there was a good 10-15 overs period where Saurav and Sachin just went bonkers. They were hitting English bowlers to every corner of the ground. And then 2021, where we had a very contrasting test match, the England openers had put up 135 for the opening wicket. Indian bowlers were just not able to find the lengths, and English bowlers, on the contrary, were just able to steamroll the Indian batting. So, considering that it's an early Test series start, generally we have not seen the early Test series start as far as India and England are concerned in last couple of series. So, a North Test match in mid June, I think it is going to be a spicier stuff.
Yeah, like I've written a book on the history of Test cricket, but I'm not good at reading pictures, so I'm not going to say I know what it's going to be like. But I'd say
Yes.
Leeds Disney do produce very good cricket wickets.
Yes. And
The triple
one
wicket is terrific, for
and
example.
even to be honest, for me, the biggest curious case is Edgbaston because the second test match, because Edgbaston over the years have given the flattest of pitches. Like
Yes,
2023 Ashes was, I think, the Australian batting coach went on to say that it is the flattest wicket he's ever seen. And India still couldn't manage to win a test match there, not even once. I think in 8 outings, they have not won a single test match in Edgbaston. 2018, they came close with that beautiful 100 from Virat Kohli.
Kohli.
And I think they missed Bumrah in that test match because Bumrah had missed that test match because he had a split ribbing because he injured himself during Ireland T20 matches and he was not available. And Sam Curran just produced one amazing all-round performance. But the outlying example for me was 2022, where India could not even defend 378. Like England was like 100 kind of.
Hello.
Hello, I'm audible.
Yeah, I've got you now. So lost you for a second. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
at 22 and you can defend 370.
Yeah. And that was pretty surprising considering, like, is it like, what exactly is so special about Edgbaston, the central part of England? So even the pitches are flat, weather is pretty, I would say, adjustable, but still, foreign teams tend to struggle. I think Australia is the only team I can recall.
Yeah, Australia have done well recently at Edgbaston. No, England have tried to make it their kind of Gabba equivalent in terms of they've got a big raucous crowd. They like to start the series there. Maybe that's had a bit of a bearing. But yes, Australia were able to win there in 19 and 23 in both series. So it's generally a pretty good wicket. It's flat. Nothing should scare you per se about it, but maybe something about the crowd and stuff. It does have a bit of a bearing.
And yes, and I had put up a YouTube short about Lords that recently India has done well. So India has won 2 test matches out of the last 3 test matches played there. 2014, that famous victory at Lords, and then 2021, where the toast of the nation after that win. And suddenly somebody commented like, how 11 years can be recent? So people just don't understand at times that in Test cricket, the terms change completely since the history is so long because India went to England for the first time in 1932. It's been 93 years. For first 82 years, they played 16 tests as Lord and just won a single match. And in last 11 years, 2 victories. So in terms of test cricket, the relative scale changes. So because the timelines are so vast that 11 years would look pretty recent. And considering that in that period, you've just played 3 test matches, and that's why the entire narrative changes. And for an Indian audience, I think people who have grown up in this T20 era, it's very difficult for them to understand these timelines. That how 11 years can be a recent timeline in comparison to how it
Yeah.
is. So this is the beauty of Test cricket also, and I'm really looking forward to this particular Test series because I really think that this is going to set a good precedence. But what is your take? Like, which is currently the biggest Test rivalry? Is it the Ashes still, or the BGT has taken over? Like in
Well,
terms,
I think this century clearly Australia v India is the best rivalry. I think since the amazing Eden Gardens win in '01, I think it's very level in terms of number of tests each, but India have actually won slightly more than Australia. We've seen great series both in Australia and in India, and such an intensity as well. We saw those record-breaking crowds in Australia last time. India had won the previous 2 times in Australia. Australia have actually given it, pretty good to India in India. They've run India fairly close a few times.
yes.
Some of the series could have gone a different way. Well, I think that would stand out really comfortably as the best rivalry on the field this century. Even in Australia, remember, their last 3 tours of Australia, they've lost 13-0. So it's not been really that competitive in Australia. The series in England have been fantastic, really compelling, but it's been kind of half a rivalry. I think Australia v India, it's now the number one, and the Ashes obviously always has its resonance, but we do see different eras where different rivalries become bigger. I think the early '90s, Australia West Indies was an unbelievable rivalry. It's such intensity, and I think for them, Australia at the time it was bigger than the Ashes. And then when England get better and it becomes more level, then the Ashes kind of takes over a little bit more. Um, so that would and Australia West Indies in the '60s had some incredible series as well, including the
And
famous 1960-61 series where you had the tie test, the first test at Brisbane and everything. So, but I think the problem with Test cricket at the moment is because outside of the big three, no one plays three-match series even, which really limits the scope for rivalries to develop between other countries. South Africa, New Zealand, for example, there's sporting history between those countries in rugby and stuff. So, it's a very competitive series. No reason that couldn't be a great series, a great rivalry. But if they're playing two-match series, it's not going to get it's not going to resonate in the same way, really.
So is WTC the way forward, considering that there are bilateral agreements and only the finals, the WTC's finals, comes under ICC? And to be honest, we have a team like England playing 19 test matches in the entire cycle and giving their best, traveling to the different parts of the world, playing bigger series. On the contrary, we had South Africa, which just managed to play good like 10 test matches and ended up with the WTC finals. So is it even fair to have this kind of a system, or do you think so that going forward there be a two-tier system where like maybe the big threes of cricket might be stacked up differently from other nations, or is it? I think the current system is the best way forward. Like, what is your take on this?
So in the book, I have I set out what I think should happen. First, I think the WTC is really, really important. You need all countries to have the pinnacle to get to a Test cricket. When I talked to Kane Williamson, he very much said, beating India, winning that WTC final was, the best day of his cricket career. So you need that's great. You need, South Africa players, Sri Lanka players to aspire to that as well. And so for me, the model I would have adapting the current model, we have 6 series over 2 years, 3 at home, 3 away. So what I would do, I'd make every series 3 matches of 4 days each. Remember, we have very few draws nowadays. Most matches aren't even making day 5. So I think you could have 4-day tests. So 3 matches of 4 days each, maybe have 95 overs a day, say 96 overs, but you don't need too many. And you can start another half hour earlier and things. There's things you can do to actually give you more time to bowl those overs. So I'd have every series 3 matches times 4 days each. Every game very simple. You get 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. Suddenly everyone can understand the league table. None of this percentage of points contested, which makes your head hurt, frankly. You get a very clear structure, and the top, and then you advance from there. And so what I would do, I'd actually have the top team go straight to the final. I'd then have 2v3. They play off in a semi-final, a 6-day match, the week before the final. And if it's a draw after 6 days, which I don't think it would be, given our Test cricket's played, I think it'd be very rare. But in case it is a draw, then the team who's second would progress. But there's no way you can play for a draw over in a 6-day match. You have to play to win for both sides. And then you have the final. And I think that way you create another game that's really, high stakes, high jeopardy. This is the semi-final, and that also creates more context for the final. I think that would be a really good system, and that means everyone plays 18 tests over 2 years, plus any WTC playoff and final matches, which is a decent amount. It really actually does help with scheduling, because you can, for New Zealand to play South Africa, it's much better narrative-wise, and actually for the players to improve to have 3 matches of 4 days each than 2 or 5, which will be over in 3 or 4 days anyway. I think that's a good, pretty clean structure. Not everyone plays everyone in US sports, so it's not in the world, as long as you have, the playoffs and finals is fair. So that's, I think, what I would do. And I'd just say, for Border Gavaskar, for the Ashes, you can just play extra matches after that are just, you can make it a 5-match series, but only the first 3 matches count. But let's make it really simple. Let's make every series of 3 matches each, 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. You can play extra friendlies outside, extra matches outside that system for your own trophies and stuff. But the actual structure should be really clear, transparent. And that means in the actual Test Championship, now England might play twice as many games as South Africa. Under this structure, everyone's playing the same number of games. So I think it's a much, much better system.
Brilliant insights. And I think you have given enough food for thought as far as the officials are also concerned. It's such a clear structure, and something which would even make commercial sense, and still you would have enough competitive rivalries and almost bringing everybody on the same stage at the equal footing. Just the last question, because I think I've already exceeded the time that I've asked for, and considering that it's been such an amazing discussion, like I had a discussion with Tom Jones last week, who's the coach of Hungary cricket team, and he's worked extensively in ECB also. So I was having a word with him about like how the coaching ecosystem is and how basically the game is perceived in England. So he was telling me that there is a little decline as far as the acceptance or adoption for cricket is concerned. Like people are more inclined towards football now. So do you think so? Like these things are going to impact the future of Test cricket also? Like maybe people are going to treat Test cricket and T20 as two different games itself, not even exactly the two formats. And in India also we're facing this problem because I've been talking to a lot of people in NCA also, and they also say that all these young cricketers who coming up the ranks, they're more inclined towards playing. I would say the white ball cricket, like T20, especially because the leagues all over are paying them so well. And even if you look at the techniques of the players, like people like uh, Vaibhav Suryavanshi, a 14-year-old kid coming up, Ayush Matre, the 17-year-old from CSK, the kind of grips that they have, the the strong bottom hand grips and everything, something which would not even suit to the defensive style of play in Test cricket. So, what do you think would be the future forward? Like, how is it in England, and like, what is your take on this particular thing?
No, I think I've actually been surprised the last few years about how closely aligned the best players still are in different formats of the game. So the 2023 World Cup final, 21 of those players have actually played Test cricket, and about I was looking about 17 of them I think have been regulars in Test cricket and really good Test players.
Yes.
So the best players do still, to a surprising degree, do tend to be the best players. Obviously, if you're a power hitter in T20, that is a distinct role. But in general, the overlap is remarkable, um, which all does suggest that there is merit for your white ball game in playing longer formats. Partly because if you're a hitter in in a T20 league, you might go for 2 months and you might face 80, 100 balls in the whole competition, right? Hardly ever, and you can't even tell if you're out of form because you're not even facing enough. And so yeah, I think it's a better game if things are aligned together, and I think that does go back to scheduling. I would like to see windows for Test cricket. Maybe have 3 windows a year where you have a 3-4 week window where you just have Test cricket played, and then and then the flip, you have windows for leagues and stuff. That's absolutely fine. I think that creates more coherence, and I think there is a bit of magic actually when you have multiple tests at the same time. See this on Boxing Day sometimes when you have 3 great tests at the same time, and almost kind of what's happening in one test almost creates more narrative about another match as well. Especially if you have the WTC structure and you're really promoting that. So I think that's what I'd like to see. And you if you do that, you don't need players to make a choice between club and country because this choice is kind of made out for them. So I think proper windows is a really good thing we can do, and I think players would like to have the chance to play Test cricket. They don't necessarily want to be losing money, to play it in terms of compared to what they could earn in franchise leagues. But I think there's enough money in the game. There's still enough interest in Test cricket to make a system that does work for everybody.
Yes, and I'm amazed that you used such a beautiful analogies because this is something which I have shared with my audience also multiple times that 2023 finals kind of gives you a perfect reflection that ODI cricket is pretty much like Test cricket. Pretty much the teams who've done well would have at least 8 to 9 Test playing
Yes,
regulars in their
definitely.
ranks.
Yeah,
Like apart from Zampa and Maxwell, considering that he's not playing Test cricket anymore, but he has played a
yeah,
significant
yeah.
Test cricket. Like, and in Indian team also, I think there was hardly anybody. Maybe Sky was the one who had just played a solitary Test match in BGT 2023. But apart from him, like everybody else was pretty much the regular Test player, like featuring in regular Test 11s of India. So quite a brilliant analogy, I think, and understandably, considering that Test cricket is something which has stood the test of times in last 150 years, and they have kind of I think they've been able to find their way throughout the entire cycle, even though where ODI cricket, like though it's a relatively recent format, but it has gone through many changes just to be relevant. But somehow it has not been the case with Test cricket. It has stayed relevant even with keeping majority of the things intact. Like in last 60, 70 years, the fundamentals of the game hasn't changed much. It's almost the same. And still, there are people who love playing Test cricket. There are people who love watching it. In India, also, there is a significant, I think, audience who are looking forward to series like BGT, or looking forward to series like England. If even if I'll show the numbers of our live shows, whenever we have discussed Test cricket, we almost get the similar numbers, like as compared to what we would have got in a case of an IPL match. So this is the kind of craze people have. A completely different set of audience, but yes, there are people, we call them the purists, who are actually looking forward to Test cricket also in a very ardent manner.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I love T20 as well. So you don't need to have this kind of false war between formats. You can enjoy them all in different ways.
Yes. And last, any closing remarks that you would like to share about your book about Test cricket?
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a joy to chat. So yeah, this book was 5 years in the making. It's narrative history. It's a book about stories, much more than stats and stuff. So you should be able to read it from the start to the end. So many great interviews with people from around the world, so many great stories that I learned more writing it. So yeah, put a huge amount into it, and I hope you all enjoy reading it.
And seriously, I really loved it. I'm a dyslexic, so I had to bank on the audio part of it. It was a good 9-hour journey, and I just simply loved it because the narration, the depth, I think the intertwined stories, the ebbs and flows, they were brilliant. And I really highly recommend this book to audience also, because this is, I think, a very true reflection of what Test cricket has gone through, and still able to maintain that innocence in terms of its appeal to the audience. And I'm very sure people are going to get a very broader perspective, and also like first-hand experience of all the greats of the game who have also contributed to this book through your stories, through your interactions with them. And
Thank you, Deepak. That's really, really kind.
thank you. Thanks a lot for giving all the time, and I'll try my level best to put this up as quickly as possible. I will try to delay it a little bit till the time IPL final is there. But
Yeah, it's perfect. There's no hurry. I think do that. It's perfect. You can
yeah,
even
but
do it before the test
but I
series.
think just after the IPL final, because the focus is going to shift on Test cricket with WTC finals and England tour,
Yeah,
I think that
that's
will be the
perfect.
perfect time to
Yeah, that sounds
maybe
great.
release
Yeah,
this. So this is the timing I've planned. Maybe 4th or 5th of June, we
that's
we are going
perfect.
to go live with this.
Look forward to that. Thank you so much. And I've just messaged you. Does the Amazon India link? Can you just check if stocks are in stock? If books are
Yes,
in
it is
stock?
there. It is there. I checked that, and I'll put it in the bio also.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Deepak, for having me. Really, really enjoyed it. It was a real pleasure to chat, and thank you so much for your kind
Same
words
here.
about the
Same
book.
here. Same here.
Yeah.
Thanks a
Are you
lot.
going to be in England?
Um, I have lived in in Switzerland for a year, and I was an exchange student in Germany, but somehow never got the chance to be to England. I have traveled Europe pretty extensively. My sister plans to go to England soon because she loves going there. She's been there a couple of times, and maybe I might tag along if possible.
Okay. Well, if you're ever in England, give me a shout. It'd be nice to meet, especially at cricket.
Definitely. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Deepak. Real pleasure. Cheers.
Thank
All
you.
the best. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.